we elaborate on Adṛṣṭa. So, what are the kind of facts that Vaisheshika explains using Adṛṣṭa? That is, we don't see that Adṛṣṭa unseen force, but it produces many effects. Dharma also operates through Adṛṣṭa. Which are the other effects which we see in the Vaisheshik version? Physical movements like movement of needles towards magnets, or circulation of water in plant bodies, or the upward motion of fire, sideward motion of winds. Then we also have biological and psychological processes. After death, the movement of the soul when it takes a new body, the assimilation of food and drink through which our body grows and changes, the first movement of the mind at the start of new life, then the cosmic processes as well. For example, the life processes of animals and plants, the continuation of atoms and worlds, the motion of fire, earth, then death, rebirth, and even the physical phenomena which affect our fortunes. All of these stem from Adṛṣṭa, and all these ultimately require Adṛṣṭa, which stems from the Vedic works, that is Shrot Karma. So, what we directly experience, which is the thrust, is only part of reality. Many important processes in the world are contingent on an unseen moral ritual order, which is Adṛṣṭa. Now we will see moksha. So, moksha as an annihilation of Adṛṣṭa. So, Vaisheshik defines salvation or moksha as the complete destruction of Adṛṣṭa, leading to termination of all contacts and non-production of the rebirths. So, as long as Adṛṣṭa remains, it continues to drive new bodies, continues new experiences and new worlds. And when it is completely exhausted, no new body or rebirth follows, and thereby the soul is liberated. What are the sources of Adṛṣṭa? These are not good and bad deeds in general, but these are Vedic works. Kanad, who was the founder of Vaisheshik, does not speak in general moral terms. This is good, this is bad, this is virtual, this is sinful. He doesn't speak like this. He speaks very specifically of Vedic works, which are enjoined in the Shruti. For example, the initiation rites, Nayan, student life, brahmacharya, the household duties, forest dweller life, grihastha vanaprastha, that is yagya, sacrifices, dan, bath, rituals, recitations of mantras at fixed times. So these actions produce the Adṛṣṭa, which in turn gives result to prosperity or specific worldly results, sons, rains, cattle, and eventually moksha. So we have a nice thing to notice here about how everything is also to an extent tied to material results. We had also seen that in Sankhya philosophy. What is the distinction between Drist and Adrist then? Adrist is seen and experienced, Adrist is unseen. And some categories in Vaisheshik involve Drist and others involved Adrist. Although Kannad gives only a few explicit examples, almost all interesting and riveting philosophical problems in his system ultimately is contingent on Adrist and how it is related to Dharma. We also have a discussion on what pure and impure food is. Kannad describes pure food as sacrificially purified one and impure food as the rest. He says that taking pure food leads to prosperity through Adrishta, and impure food is contrary to Dharma. So this shows that everyday practices like what you eat are also connected via Adṛṣṭa to the cosmic and moral consequences. Now, where do Vaisheshik and Mīmāṃsā agree and disagree? They both agree on basic metaphysics. Mīmāṃsā, the later Mīmāṃsā writers accept almost all of the Nyāya-Vaiśeṣika metaphysics. They agree about substances, qualities, atoms. They also accept the idea of Adṛṣṭa, which is an unseen potency, and on the structure of reality. Mīmāṃsā is basically Vaisheshik along with the ritual focus. And what are the main points of differences then? So big points of differences are number one, which is the self-validity of Veda, Swatah Pramanya. Mīmāṃsā says that Vedic sentences are valid by themselves. They don't need any external justification. The Nyāya-Vaiśeṣika says that validity is proved, is not just assumed. Then, on the eternality of the Veda, Mīmāṃsā says that Veda is beginning, beginningless and authorless, is not written by anyone. Vaisheshik, the early Vaisheshik, assumes that Veda was composed by some superhuman person. Some sutras have been cited which hint that Kannada thought of Veda as written by someone superior, but it is not authorless. Mīmāṃsā denies Ishvara as creator. Vaisheshik Sutra also never mentions Ishvara at all. But it explains everything through Adṛṣṭa and Vedic action. So functionally, it is also non-theistic. So, and now we have a discussion on the eternality of sound, which is Shabd. Mīmāṃsā says that the sounds are eternal and the spoken sound is only a manifestation. Nyāya-Vaiśeṣika, the later one, it treats sound as non-eternal. It says that sound is produced and is later destroyed. Now, what does Kannada own text say? Is a puzzle here. Direct perception of self in the I notation according to Kumaril. So Kumaril was a Mīmāṃsā authority. He said that we directly perceive the self when we have the experience I. This belongs to me. I have done this. But the traditional Nyayic system says that the self is known primarily by inference. We infer a permanent substance or permanent subject from pleasure, pain, memory. So these seem to some argue that early Vaisheshik leans towards Mīmāṃsā positions in certain aspects, which points the eternality of sound and the direct perception of the self. So early Vaisheshik is actually leaning towards the Mīmāṃsā positions. Why do we say that? Because in number 4, which is the eternality of sound, we said that the later Nyāya-Vaiśeṣika treats sound as non-eternal. And in the direct perception of self, we talk about traditional Nyaya, uh, saying that the self is known primarily by inference. But Vaisheshik on both these accounts is actually leaning towards Mīmāṃsā positions. Now we come to sound and soul in the Vaisheshika Sutra. Now, as we were in some confusion regarding sound's eternality, now on sound, Vaisheshika Sutra does something very odd. Kannada argues that sound is non-eternal, it is produced by contact and it perishes quickly. But at the end of the chapter, he reverses and concludes in favor of the eternality of sound, which is exactly what Mīmāṃsā argues. So, inside the same chapter, we have arguments both in favor of and in against eternality of sound. Later, of course, it is in favor of. So, the author, Canard, here in this case, uh, they uh, so the later Nyāya-Vaiśeṣika writers defend non-eternality, and the last sutras might be interpolation, but the fact remains that the author which we talked about, Canard, so he himself closes the arguments in favor of the eternality of sound, and which aligns itself with Mīmāṃsā. How does the Vaisheshik prove the self then? So traditionally, the textbooks say that Vaisheshik, like Nyaya, holds that the self is the substratum, or the self is inferred as a substratum of pleasure, pain, or cognition. But the sutras themselves, they show an internal debate. The first step is inference, that the self is inferred because there must be a seat for activity, pleasure, pain, or knowledge. Unless you have a permanent subjects, how would you tie activity, pleasure, pain, and knowledge? But an objection might be there that we do not perceive that these activities belong to soul and not to body. So, how can the inference be certain? Maybe the body itself is the subject. Now, in response, we say that we appeal to the authority of scriptures, which is the Agam, and we finally reach to the conclusion of direct self-perception, that we finally perceive this, we directly perceive the self in the immediate awareness, I. So scriptural testimony is not the primary proof. Inference is secondary support. The fundamental proof is the inner perception of I. So Vaisheshik ends up very close to Kumaril's Mīmāṃsā, that the self is directly experienced, and inference and scriptures are just do the job of corroborating that. So these considerations might lead us to think that Vaisheshik is representative of a school of Mīmāṃsā thought plus metaphysics. We can say that an it's an old Mīmāṃsā subgroup that developed a realist ontology of atoms or categories to shore up the Vedic doctrine. What is the official aim of the Vaisheshik Sutra then? What does Vaisheshik Sutra actually say? Vaisheshik Sutra starts with dharma, as we have seen, not atoms. The purpose is to explain dharma. Dharma is defined as that by which abhyuday, that is prosperity, and nishrayas, which is salvation, happens. So it is a guide, besides being a physics manual, it is a guide doing the right actions which are in line with the Vedas, and understanding how these right actions lead to prosperity and liberation. The Vedas is valid because it leads to prosperity and salvation. Dravya, gun, karma, and causality also have been talked about. The nine dravyas are the uh, uh, earth, water, fire, earth, ether, time, space, soul, and mind. Prithvi, Ap, Tejas, Vayu, Akash, Kal, this, Atman, and Manas. These are the basic substantial realities, and whatever other things which we observe are a combination or just the states of these. The gunas, which are the qualities, include color, taste, order, and touch, number, measure, separateness, disjoining, contact, belonging to a high genus, species, Karma does not include moral action. Karma means physical motion, upward, downward, contraction, expansion, or horizontal, which are the basic motions which an object can have. What is common between Dravya, Guna, and Karma? All of these share some general features that they are existent. They really do exist. It's a realist ontology after all. They are non-internal, at least in their particular forms, they are non-internal. They are substantive, that they are real categories. They can be causes, they can be effects, and they possess generality and particularity. We also have a, an account of who causes what. Dravya produces dravya and gun produces gun. But karma is not necessarily produced by karma. There are certain motions, some motions arise not because they have been necessitated by prior motions, but they arise from adrishta or other factors. Dravya bears both karma and gun. It is the samavai cause. By samavai means it's a material cause of other dravya, guna or karma. And dravya does not destroy its cause or its effect. With gun inheres only in dravya. Gun cannot possess other gunas, and it is in itself it is not the cause of contact or disjoining. Gun serves as non-material or asamavai cause of dravya, gun and karma. For example, the whiteness of two hot pieces of iron, two hot iron pieces being hot, is the asamavai cause of our recognition that both these iron pieces are similar. Karma inheres only in dravya, and karma cannot exist in more than one object at one instance. A single motion belongs to a single thing. Karma is an independent cause of contact and disjoining and of inertia in motion, which is vague. Karma is destroyed by karma. One motion, is responsible for stopping another. But karma is not the cause of dravya or of karma in the strict sense, because a substance can be produced even without motion. For example, through Adṛṣṭa, some new contact of atoms might happen, and each motion cannot be said to be produced by more than one thing. And numbers like 2, 3, and we have various relations like two bodies being separate, that is separateness, contact, disjoining. These all require more than one dravya. A particular dravya, it is the consequence, it is the result of many contacts of atoms, and one color comes from many colors mixing. Then we have universals, which are Samanya, Vishesh, and Sat. Carnard says that if there is no cause, there can be no effect. But there may be a cause even when the effect is not at all produced. For example, a seed that does not sprout, does it mean that the causes which were, which ordinarily give rise to a seed were not there? No, right? So causal relation is sine qua non for the effect. In the presence of the cause doesn't necessarily guarantee actualization. We would need some auxiliary condition. So the genus and species are mind relative. The genus which is Samanya and species which is Vishesha. So as applied to the class concepts as we see ordinarily, for example, cowness or treeness, these are relative to our understanding. Our mind groups things in these ways. Bhava, which is being, indicates merely the continuity of existence, and it is a very general universal kind of thing. The ultimate genus is the Sat, which is the beingness. There is a universal, ultimate universal beingness, Sat. It is present in all Dravya, Gun and Karma. So it is different from each of them, yet inheres in all. So this Sat, which has no genus above it, it has no species below it. It is just existence itself. So you might have seen many discussions in the Western philosophy as well, right from up to right from the Aristotelian days, even earlier than that, on being. This is how being is tackled in the Nyaya, in the Vaisheshik. Sorry. So Satya is a distinct category. It gives us the very notion that something is, right? Something is dash dash dash. It's not that. Something is. It is the same in earth, in color, in motion. It is purely about the fact of being. And then we have specific universals like Dravyatva, Gunatva, and Karmatva. So Vaisheshik also recognizes specific universals like Dravyatva, which is thingness or substancehood. Gunatva is qualityhood and Karmatva is actionhood. Now these Dravyatva, Gunatva and Karmatva are separate categories from universal being. Like Sattva, they have no genus above them, only species, earthhood, waterhood, etc. And they can be distinguished from each other but not reducible. These are not reducible to something else. So at the very top, we have Sattva, which is the existence. Pardon me if I had mispronounced it as Sattva. At the top of everything is Sat. Under it, we have universals like Dravyatva, Gunatva, and Karmatva. And under each of these, we have specific universals. And finally, the individual things.